Episode 3 of Hand in Glove, our serial by Arnold Crowther. Arnold has been sent to college by his parents, but still hankers after a career as a Punch and Judy man. Douglas Leach reads Episode 3, Beside the Seaside.
Before I go on with my story, I think it's time Punch's story was told. The modern-style Punch and Judy show is believed to have been brought over to England in 1828 by an Italian showman called Piccini. Before that, Punch was a stringed marionette and not a glove puppet as he is today. The old showman Mayhew bought his figures from Piccini. There were 12 of them: Punch, Judy, the baby, the beadle, Scaramouche, Nobody, Jack Ketch, the Grand Signor, the Doctor, the Devil, Merry Andrews, and the Blind Man. The last two have completely vanished from the show. In the old version, the Blind Man accidentally knocked Punch over with his stick. Punch then grabbed it and killed him with it. The Blind Man has gone, but Punch retains his stick. Nobody was a courtier figure who appeared in the interval. He bowed to the audience and his neck grew to a great height. Piccini claimed to be able to make Nobody remove his hat. If he really could, I'd take my hat off to him. Although I'm one of the few showmen still to use Nobody, I've never achieved this feat. Scaramouche was Punch's neighbor, and it was he who owned Toby the dog until Punch took him over. The Grand Signor was Scaramouche's servant, and some say he was replaced by the clown, though I think he became the Negro. Joey the Clown was based on the Drury Lane clown, Joseph Grimaldi, and Jack Ketch the Hangman was named after the hangman who put an end to Dick Turpin. Then there's the Devil and the Ghost, who was introduced at a later date. Some showmen have banished them both, along with a gallows and coffin, believing that all these horrors frighten the children, as if one could frighten a modern child who is brought up with the terrifying creatures from outer space that the television offers him. A crocodile and a couple of boxers sometimes make an appearance. The crocodile was originally the property of the doctor, a relic of the days when medical men used to have stuffed crocodiles hanging in their consulting rooms. The boxers are a fairly modern introduction and changed their names according to the popular boxers of the day. Other characters, from Lord Nelson to Doctor Who, have from time to time found their way into the show. But the basic story remains the same. Judy asks Punch to mind the baby, and when it won't stop crying, he throws it out of the window. Judy beats him with the stick, but he wrenches it from her and knocks her down. The policeman tries to arrest Punch, but he too is killed. The doctor, who comes on to examine the bodies, suffers the same fate as the other two. Then the clown appears, and there's a lot of fun trying to count the bodies. This is followed by the boxing match, and Punch and Joey's comedy business with a ghost, to the accompanying cries of, "Look out, he's behind you," from the children. We're now about halfway through the show, and Nobody appears and bows to the audience while his neck gets longer and longer. The hangman now arrives with the gallows. He tries to get Punch to put his neck in the noose, but Punch sees through his little game and asks for a demonstration. The hangman falls for the trick and puts his own neck into the noose, whereupon Punch pulls the rope and hangs him. He and the clown then bring on a coffin and have a lot of trouble trying to get the body into it. At last they succeed and dance round singing, "Here we go round the mulberry bush." The devil appears and announces that he has come for Punch. When asked how he will know him, he says that Punch is the man who's just been hanged. Punch points to the body in the coffin and says, "That's the man who's just been hanged." So old Nick takes the wrong body down to hell. He soon discovers his mistake and comes back for Punch. There's a terrible fight, and Punch seems to be losing. But with one last effort, he throws the devil off and kills him with his stick. Twirling the body round and round on his stick, he sings, "Hurrah, hurrah, the devil's dead!" Some showmen let the devil take Punch down to hell, but this ending isn't at all popular with the children. I once let my Punch be eaten by a crocodile, but two kiddies started crying, and I had to make him come alive again. Punch may be an old villain, but he's the children's hero, and like Robin Hood, he must never go under. I remained a faithful disciple of the old rogue all the time I was at college, and by the time I finished my college education, my masters had decided I wasn't cut out for a business career. My father, who reached the same conclusion, invited me into his study one day for a madman talk. Well, son, you obviously haven't changed your ideas about a career. But do you really think you could make your living in the entertainment world? Well, how do I know? I can only try. But have you any idea about how you'd go about getting work? In reply, I handed him a letter. It was the answer to my application for a summer season at the seaside. To my surprise, my father read the letter, shook me by the hand, and said, "Good luck." Before the season began, I carved myself a new set of puppets, and this time my mother dressed them for me willingly. "You can always come back if you don't make a go of it," she said. But I was determined to finish the season, no matter what happened. The great day came at last. My father helped me to carry my luggage down to the station and stood there waving goodbye as the train went out. When I arrived at my destination, I left my luggage at the station and went in search of a room. Every boarding house I passed had a no vacancies notice in the window. I spent the whole day tramping from door to door and still hadn't found a place by nightfall. In desperation, I went to the police station where a kindly sergeant let me sleep in the cell. I was so tired, I fell straight into a deep sleep and woke to find the same policeman shaking me. He brought me a cup of tea. "You can't sleep any longer," he said. "We may need this cell for other criminals today." I continued my search for a room and at about tea time called at a dilapidated house on the outskirts of the town. The door was opened by a blousy woman in curlers with a cigarette drooping from the corner of her mouth. I told her my story, and she seemed to take pity on me. "I'm full up with laborers, but I can take you in if you don't mind sleeping in the bathroom." By that time, I was ready to put up with anything, and accepted gladly. I lived in that bathroom for the whole season. There was a wooden cover on the bath, and this was made up as a bed. I certainly found out one meaning of the phrase, bed and board. I had to get up early so that the other lodgers could wash, and I couldn't go to bed before they'd all come in. As most of the laborers spent their evenings in the pubs, it was always late before I got to sleep. One of the taps dripped all the time, and for the first few nights, I couldn't sleep at all. But I dared complain for fear of being turfed out into the streets again. When I reported to the pier manager, he seemed a little put out that I was so young. "Oh, well, it's too late to get anyone else now. I only hope you're as good as you think you are." I had to do 3 shows a day, 1 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. The first day, it rained cats and dogs, so I had a full house at all 3 performances. The manager seemed pleased with the show, but warned me not to expect such good houses when it was fine. I soon found out how right he was. Even Mr. Punch couldn't compete with the blazing sun, and it was the hottest summer I can remember. On several occasions, I performed for only 3 or 4 children. One morning, the manager had a suggestion. "I think we'll take your show out in the open. There's a space at the end of the pier you can use." I took the pool to the far end of the pier and built it up where he told me. Despite the hot weather, there was quite a breeze out at sea, and as soon as I put on the cloths around, the whole fit-up blew out and took off like a kite. I stood there watching as it rose in the air and finally crashed down into the sea. In a panic, I ran to the office and told the manager what had happened, but he only laughed. "You'll just have to tie it down, sonny," he said. I walked sadly down to the beach expecting the booth to be either smashed to pieces or sunk to the bottom of the sea. I was delighted to discover that some bathers had rescued it and dragged it onto the beach. Except for a good soaking, there was very little damage done, and I soon had it in its place and tied down with guy ropes. By the time I was ready to do the performance, the sun had dried it. I've always believed that everything happens for the best, and in this case, I was proved right. The local paper featured a story about the Punch and Judy show that flew away, and it turned out to be the best and cheapest advertisement I've ever had. People flocked to see the show that had had such an adventure. One afternoon, I noticed a frail old man watching the show from a bar chair. Afterwards, he called me over. "Who taught you the dialogue?" he said. I told him that as a small boy, I used to watch a Professor Smith and had learned his patter by heart. "I thought so," he laughed. "So you're the kid that wanted to be a Punch and Judy man?" "Did you know Professor Smith too?" I asked. I ought to. I am Professor Smith." I was delighted to meet my old friend again, though he'd altered so much that I hadn't recognized him. He told me he'd had a stroke and had been paralyzed for some years. As his friend wheeled him away, he called over his shoulder, "I see you don't intend to swallow a swallow." We met several times that summer, and the professor loved to talk about the old days and his adventures with Punch. Then, one day, he handed me a parcel. "I thought you'd like this," he said. "I don't suppose I'll be needing it anymore." I tore open the paper. As I looked at the contents, tears came into my eyes. It was his most cherished possession, the 100-year-old puppet he'd often called the best Punch figure in the business. Towards the end of the season, I saw the professor's friend sitting on the pier by himself. When I asked after the professor, he wiped his eyes. "He died last week," he said. He went on to tell me how much my shows had cheered the old man. "I'm sure he'll be watching you from wherever he's gone." I've often thought the same thing, and have sometimes felt as though the professor was standing in the booth with me while I worked his Punch. The pier manager originally asked me to go back to the pier the following year, but fate was against me. The council had rented a pitch on the sands to another performer, and on reflection, the manager didn't think the resort was big enough to support 2 Punch shows. Reluctantly, he cancelled my future engagement, and I returned home to carry out my winter bookings.